Welcome, 16-bit hockey fans, to another NHL 94 podcast. I'm your host, Len the Legend, and today I'm joined by His Highness King Raph. King Raph, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks, Len, for having me on.
No, it's my pleasure. I've learned a little bit about you. I've watched a lot of your videos in terms of your gameplay, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, man, I'm just curious how it is that you got into NHL 94 because you're a pretty prominent member of the community.
Yeah, I mean, it goes way back, right? I think I like many people, played NHL 94 for the first time when I was a kid. I remember distinctly playing NHL hockey, that original version, at my cousin's house, and just being blown away by this game, right? Yes, that's the one. Absolutely loved it. I didn't have a Genesis at the time, and I was like, I need to get a Sega. And I think the first game I purchased was NHLPA 93 and started playing that, religiously. And then 94. And then I think 95 is when I ended up stopping playing. And then honestly, didn't really touch it for, I don't know, a decade or so or more. And then someone said, hey, there's this website. You remember the game NHL 94? There's a website. I'm like, yeah, I used to be great at that game. And I checked out NHL94.com somewhere around 2009, 10, 11, somewhere around there. Signed in just to post. My first post in the NHL94 forums was about this bug where when you make an assist, when you pass the puck and someone shoots a one-timer, it does not count as an assist. And it's like this little thing that would always bug me because, of course, I like stats, I like numbers. So I posted that. Because I posted that, Halifax, Daryl, who you've already spoken to, he, basically sent out a message to all the forum members. We're running an online league. I was like, what? You can play this online. And I rejoined the sort of community back in 2011, tried it online, and was just instantly hooked again, for so many different reasons. It was just the gameplay's fun, the competition's fun, it's simple. The community's fantastic. And then when I learned about all of the analysis that's been done about the players, the ratings, the weight bug, the teams, the advantage, all of that, I was just sucked in. And then of course getting destroyed by all the top players. I'm like, wow, this guy's so good. And since then, honestly, just fell in love with the whole community. Because there's so many aspects of it that I love, and it gives me so much as like my main hobby and go-to over the years now, and that's why I also put in a lot, or as much as I can, as far as helping others and just adding fun things and just being a part of the whole retro gaming community, but specifically 94.
Yeah, you're a very prominent member of the community. You've dedicated a lot of time and effort into improving everything, and I'm just myself, and I guess a lot of others, thank you for your assistance because you've made the community just so much better as a result, and we'll touch upon that. But NHL 93, NHLPA 93,
Yeah.
I think is the specific name because they didn't have the license from the NHL. That game was a lot of fun. I thoroughly enjoyed that
Oh yeah.
one. And the one thing that they have in that I wish they incorporated in 94 was the fighting. The fighting aspect in 93 was amazing, especially when you knock some guy out of the game and they were lying on the ice bleeding and then they had to skate all hurt to the penalty box. I absolutely love that. You must have had a hoot playing that back in the day, didn't you?
Oh, it was not only just the fighting, but even the blood was like when they were injured and they fall down and like blood shoots out of their head.
Yeah.
And so, yes, they had to get rid of that. I think, the story goes when the NHL decided to license the teams, and someone caught wind of Gretzky bleeding on the ice, the infamous, swinger scene. And they were like, if you want the NHL teams, you got to get rid of the blood and the fighting. And so unfortunately, they had to pull that out. And again, I think I found out recently in the documentary that was posted that was almost like a last minute thing. They had built in the fighting for 94, which just in some ways stings even more, knowing that somewhere there is some lost code out there that we can one day maybe find of this lost fighting code.
Do you think that code is still in there? Like they just turned that switch off, or do you think that it was stripped out?
It's
That's
out.
too
Yeah.
bad. Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to say that with, I'll say that with like 80%, 85% confidence, because one, I know that the fighting graphics, I don't think are in the 94 sprites. Like you could look in and, at this point, it's
Oh,
not that difficult to look at all the sprites. And what's interesting, you could see the fighting sprites are in 95, even though I don't think fighting is in 95, but you could see the sprites. So there's some development there. You could see when there's things still in the game. And so at the very least, if the graphics aren't in there, I don't think there's a whole, it's called a subroutine or a routine of code fighting still remnant of there in 94.
okay, that makes a lot of sense now. It sort of closes the door on my beliefs or even hopes that there would be some code that would be unearthed. But yeah, thanks a lot. You just
Switch it
reminded
on,
me.
right? Just switch it on and it's back in. That would be
That'd
great.
be awesome. Wouldn't that be
Yeah.
so cool? But yeah, like NHL 95. I know we're talking about 94 and I'm jumping a couple of years now. It seems like you mentioned that you kind of stopped playing after that. Why was it? Why was NHL 95 the last one you wanted to play? Because I talked about it
All
at
right.
length. I hated 95, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So when I was a teenager, I played a lot of 95 because the features were awesome. Season mode, trade your players. I would trade everyone that I loved back to my New York Rangers. I'd be playing seasons. All the stats were kept, all the records, goals, awards. I loved all of that. I didn't fully appreciate how uh, how terrible of a game it is compared to 94 in its pure gameplay. So if you're playing against your friends or any nowadays online, it really doesn't hold up. 94 is still great, but I played a lot of 95 just because of those features. It was just so fun playing it by yourself, really, as a kid. I stopped only because it was right around the time I was getting, I think it was, 95 came out in 96 or no, 94. So I
94,
was
yeah.
like wrapping up high school. I just never really purchased any other game after that. I also played a lot of other video games, role-playing games and things like that. And then because I love video games, when I get into them, I get into them, and it's a problem. So then I knew I had to kind of not get PlayStation 1, which I think I remember came out around that time. I said I gotta that's another one of those generational leap forwards. When that console came out, pretty much it eradicated Super Nintendo and Sega like right away. Everyone just got a PS1, and I know my friend had it, so I used to come over and play games with him, and just never really picked it back up. I never got 96, 97. That just never really touched those games.
Were you into Final Fantasy 7 for the PlayStation 1?
It was now first it was Twisted Metal. We played that endlessly, which was great, and then Diablo, and then again it was just because I didn't have it. Like the role playing games would you got to dedicate so much time to doing that. So I would always just revert back to old Sega, Shining Force, Shining Force 2, and
I was going to mention that.
Yeah, those are the greatest. Yeah, I love them.
Shining, is there one Shining in the Darkness as well? Is that another
Yes,
one?
there was.
Yeah. I remember, yeah, all these games, and I played a lot of them. But
Sort of Vermilion. There was some weird any role playing game I think I eventually picked up and played on Sega.
And nowadays it's easy to do with an emulator and ROM. You can just go back and relive and save states. Those random battles. You could kind of walk around them if you wanted to, just keep rolling the dice. Anyways, we'll talk about the NHL 94 because I'm curious to know, in your eyes, what makes it so special to you?
It's a good question. I think there is there's this simple elegance to the game where it is a simple game in a sense that you can pick it up and play it right away, and probably within, I'll call it an hour, be able to score and maybe beat the computer, start your playoff run, and you kind of pick it up quickly. On top of that, as a fan of the NHL, the teams, the players are all there, editing the lines, even the pictures, the organ music adds this, meaning they have custom arena music. It just adds so much, I think, psychologically to the game that when you're playing it, it's just so fun. And I think that just holds up so well. Again, there's something about the way the shots, the skating, everything just feels right in that game. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is. It's just a combination of all of it. And what's, I think, continued to have its longevity is really this NHL 94 community that continues to play it and uncover it, creates these leagues and streams games, and has modified the games to make an NHL 24 for NHL 94, which is great. So you can continue on playing it. And when you then switch to 95, anything afterwards just seems, I don't know. It just either seems too fast, too quirky, something just doesn't quite work. So it's like lightning in a bottle. I wish, if there was something I could just pinpoint and say, this is what every other game is missing, I think they would probably figure out ways to incorporate it. But it just is what it is, I think. And I don't know if it's probably my nostalgia as well, the element of me playing that when I was a teenager and in that era of 90s hockey. So there's that element that's in there as well. Because I don't think it's, quite frankly, if you had a bunch of teenagers now pick up that game, they're not going to just fall in love with it. So I think it's all those elements for people who are probably my age and, a decade above or below.
Yeah, you're right. It was lightning in a bottle. Like if you go way, way back, I'm not sure if you played the Activision ice hockey on Atari 2600, but I enjoyed that. That was actually kind of fun, primitive as can be, but it was fun. But then it slowly got better to the NES ice hockey and Blades of Steel, depending which one you like. Both of them were very good. And then it got, yes, that's fine. And great games, by the way. And I like the intermission game that they had, the shooting game. I think it was between 10 and 12 period. A lot of fun. And then NHL Hockey 92 came out, the one I have here, and then NHL PA 93. They just got slowly better and better. And then 94 was, in my eyes, absolutely just perfect. The game engine was great. The fact that you could play 2 versus 2 if you wanted to with that multi-tap or whatever they call it, it just added a new dimension to the game. And then when they introduced 95, that game engine I despised. It felt like the skaters were on rails. You could turn really fast. You couldn't do that in 94. Maybe 94 was over-exaggerated, but that's what I liked. That's maybe not as realistic, but I just preferred that. Stepping from 92 to 94. So, yeah, man, it was lightning in a bottle. And you're right. It was easy to pick up. It didn't take much effort to learn the game and to be decent at it, but to perfect it took a lot of hours. And you've put in a ton of time, haven't you?
Yeah, probably don't even want to think about how much time now over the last 10 plus years in this online community. It's so easy to get a game against another person. But yeah, definitely put in a lot of time. And it's a little different, right? When you start playing against other people who are really dedicated and really good at the game, this is where the addiction comes in a sense where, it's really easy to learn. But in order to elevate yourself to be in the top, 20 of the online players, at least that I know of, takes a little bit of time and effort, right? You gotta dedicate a little more time to understanding the players, the nuances of the game, and that's also very exciting, because it's easy to learn, but it's also pretty difficult to master in some regards.
Any tips for new players on how they should pick up what they should be learning right away to make them a much better player?
Yeah, I tell everyone who recently joins, there's a few things that I think are key. One is just learning pick a team, any team, and really just learn about the attributes of the players and how they really affect the game. I think just that knowledge. So not even just the gameplay, no execution of skills or anything like that. You don't need to learn how to do a one-timer or any of that gameplay. Just actually learning the rosters of the starting lineups of these players are the most popular ones. And there's a great resource on the NHL 94 forums written by Angry J93. It's the first thing that I was introduced to and I read that sucked me in. He wrote the starting lineup options for every single team. So each team has a thread and it goes into each player and their attributes and it's what, depending on how you like to play, this lineup may work for you. And so I think that's just great. And so you learn a little bit about that will help you. So you understand in the game when, for example, if Jeremy Roenick is coming against you, that's a good player. You have to watch him. And then if it's somebody else, it just helps you understand that. And then the biggest other thing, at least in online competitive play, is learning how to use the manual goalie in order to just play better defense. When the classic case is when someone, let's say Roenick, lines up for a big slap shot. If you don't take the goalie, it's probably going to go in. Like if it's a decent slap shot, he's going to rip it by you. But just learning how to use that manual goalie to stop that, those are the two things. And the rest is just have fun, just play online. The community is so great in that there's enough players that are, whether you're a beginner or you think you're a pro, there's someone at your level where you should be able to have a lot of competitive games or join a league with a group of people who are in that same sort of skill level, maybe slightly better, slightly worse, and ultimately you just learn pick up a few things from there.
Now, I want to see if I fall in the category when I first played the game. I followed the trajectory of normal people that played, because when I first played it, the one attribute I truly loved was speed. I looked at that. That was the one that pretty much dominated for me which player I was going to pick. In fact, when I played Buffalo, I would always pick Randy Wood as the guy to the left side. Even though he had terrible agility, but I fell in love with the speed.
Arrow up and down. Yeah,
he's going straight line. So in your eyes, is that also what new people tend to look at first? Is it speed, or is it something else? I'm not sure if you're aware of what people tend to gravitate to.
I had the same experience as you, and my favorite team was Dallas with Russ Courtnall, Mike Modano. I was like, it's super fast. So, and I think that still remains true. Speed is very valuable in the game, right? And Roenick and Burr, everyone who you think of as the best players, all have that attribute of high speed. I mean, I could go really deep into what I think about every attribute, but really one of the things I think I've learned over the years is stick handling, agility are almost equally as important, in the sense that when you're playing against another person, controlling the puck and controlling your players is more important than being able to zip past somebody with pure speed. And in a way, having that control makes you play faster. It seems like you play faster when you're controlling the puck. You're able to make passes, dodge checks, etc. And I think weight is the other one that you'll immediately focus on. So when you first start playing, you're going to recognize those lightweight guys are just wrecking balls. When you take Fleury and Roenick and Bure, and you're just, all right, they're fast and they're light. And so it's a double whammy in the sense that those are the best players in the game. There's a reason, all right? There's that weight bug that creates that. So yeah, those are the two, speed and weight, and that you tend to focus on in the beginning. And things change as you sort of progress into a little more competitive level. The higher level players can nullify that speed, nullify that weight. There's a CB check element to the game now. So if you haven't learned about that, what's very interesting is when the computer checks you, meaning a non-player controlled player checks you, the weight bug doesn't exist. So all those heavy guys that you tend to bench and not care about become pretty useful when the computer's checking, and you can execute a move where you initiate a check, click off of the player, right? So C is to initiate the check, B, you click off, and it becomes the computer essentially making the check, and all of a sudden that weight makes a big difference. So that's been I would say about 6-7 years of recent development. Like someone figured that out and then completely changed the way people think about the players, use them, and can stop all those lightweight buggers.
Yeah, it makes some heavy defensemen usable in Genesis again if you're able to make use of the CB checking. You're right. So in terms of attributes of players, tell me a little bit about the offensive and defensive awareness. Is there any justification from looking into this? Because I haven't looked into this that much. I want to tap your brain to hear what you're thinking about that.
That is one stat that nobody's been definitively able to say what it does over the last 10 plus 12, 15 years that I've been, deeply into the game. So it's a pet peeve of mine when someone says, well, you have high offensive awareness. That means the player sets up for a one-timer better. It may be anecdotally that's what you're noticing, but I've tested that and it doesn't seem to be true. And meaning the players set up better when they're higher offensive awareness. And I've heard from others that higher defensive awareness means the defensemen typically sit back. I've heard combinations of awareness, 4-3, 3-4. And for those who don't know, the NHL 94 ratings are in the game a base from 0 to 6, and then they get translated into the numerical 0 to 100. So I've heard a lot of theories. The most likely one, which we've picked up from Mark Lesser, the main guy of the game, the designer and producer of the game, along with he's the main guy. He kind of said that you could think of awareness as a circle, a circumference around the player, and that will cause the player, the AI, right? I still think it's all AI based. I don't think this actually does anything for player controlled players. I think they just have a bigger range of reactions. Like if the puck is near them, if you have a higher awareness, the AI will be more likely to go and get that puck. and control that puck than a lower awareness. They may not hit their radius as quick. And so I think it has something to do with that, but there's no definitive what this exactly does. A lot of theories, but I'm much more of a proof guy. So I want someone to sit down, let's do some testing. It's boring. Or if you're really into the code and you can look at the actual game code itself and tell me what's happening, that's when I'll tell you what awareness does. But right now it's kind of like anecdotal, what we think.
So in your eyes, it potentially could be something of a non-issue. Like, I guess I'm looking at the stats that may be just truly trash. Is the one carryover from 93, is it aggression? I forget which one it is. So aggression has absolutely no bearing in 94 because that has something to do with fighting, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I think that's aggression has I forget if that's one that's still actually displayed in the game, but I think that has the propensity to get into a fight.
Yeah.
And then the game still has actual fighting ratings. It's buried in the lefty-righty handedness stat, but essentially there's a number there. And then I think in the 93, that was how well you can fight. So that doesn't have any bearing in 94. But yeah, I think aggression, it may have something to do as well if how likely you may be to get a penalty. There's been a lot of different tests on that, but nothing definitive. The only thing I can tell you, as I'm a numbers guy, I love looking at the stats of leagues, which are amazing. It's another thing I fell in love with when you play online leagues. All of the stats from every game are saved and leagues are saved, and so you could look at seasons and seasons of data, which is you try to uncover any meaning out of it. What I have noticed is if you are in general just checking a lot in the game, you're aggressive, you're constantly checking, you will have more penalties than someone who doesn't. So I know that it sounds pretty intuitive, but the data does show that. So if you're controlling Ray Bork and I'm controlling Ray Bork for a season, in general, whoever checks more with that person will get more penalties. So I think that there's mostly the biggest factor is how you use them versus I think any particular attribute that will cause penalties, at least.
So you've analyzed tons of data from what I gather, and that's amazing because I want to figure something out if possible. So after looking at all these leagues and looking at the stats, the goals, assists, penalty minutes, and so forth, has anything struck out to you as something you've never considered to be a result that you expected to see? For example, you see a player that is scoring more goals than what he should be, greater than the sum of his stats, or something along those lines. Is there something that just really stands out that you would have never guessed just based on pure numbers alone?
On the individual player basis, it's difficult because what I have noticed is that the results are so much more driven by the coach or the actual human using the players than it is the players themselves. But when you have when you use a certain player that versus others, so you eliminate that, you say the same coach is using these different players. It's strange. Like there's a player named Andrei Kovalenko. This is the one that just came to mind out of your questions. The first thing I think of. I played 5 seasons of a draft league, so I know I have 5 seasons of data of different players that I've used, and I looked at each of my 5 starting lineups for those 5 seasons, and it's with I would say a relatively similar group of people in that league. There wasn't a lot of variance in my opponents, so it's really good data. I thought like, all right, I have 5 seasons of me playing against the same guys. This is a good way of looking at how I'm using the players that I've drafted. That makes sense. So, and what I was surprised was I was trying to figure out who's my best winger, because I know whoever you put at center will naturally just get more points, to get more touches, they get more one-timers. So you got to factor that in. Out of all of my wingers who have great passing, great agility, Andrei Kovalenko ended up being my best winger with regards to assists per game. And he's not necessarily that skilled. He's super light and he's meant to check. He's a defensive option, but he ended up being my best assist guy per game by far. And so I was a little surprised about that when I was looking at that. So I would think it would have been like Dan Foose or somebody with like this great agility. And as I thought about it, it's probably, and I posted it, of course, because I always like to get people's thoughts on it and no secrets. And someone said, like it's probably the ability to forecheck and with Kovalenko and get the puck deep, and you get an easy goal that way when he gets an assist. That's pretty good. So that was a surprise in the sense I'm thinking, okay, he now in my mental mind goes up in the draft position. I would like to have him more than what his stats would say I should draft if I'm just doing, if I'd had an Excel or any spreadsheet and you're cranking numbers, he's not going to show up high on your list. But based on how I use him, for me, he's actually way better than a lot of the other forwards that I should be drafting, at that position.
I'm gonna have to cut this out from the video so nobody takes that type of secret from you. That secret sauce.
I'm an open book. I am constantly posting my thoughts and then regretting it as someone will snipe Kovalenko from me before when they know it's my turn. They all know I'm going to take him. So that's fine.
So speaking of
more data, different players.
Speaking of Kovalenko, because he is playing for Quebec now, I know you're not talking. You're talking about a draft league, but in terms of Quebec, there's a video I saw you play as Quebec. I think it was 2019, the King of 94 tournament, the finals.
Yeah,
it's the first time you won the tournament. The only time maybe you won a tournament. I'm not sure.
That was the King of 94. That is correct. So the King of 94 is the annual tournament that was started with Mikey McBrien, who, if you want to go into his history, he was a member of this show in Canada called Ice Pilots Northwest Territories NWT. And when that season, he's a big 94 fan. And when his reality show wrapped up the last season, he decided to make a documentary on 94.
Yeah.
And so he got it, he started all of a sudden finding the community, asking questions, and he wanted to run a tournament, said, who's the best NHL 94 player? So back in 2015 was the first one in Toronto. And that was the first live tournament. It was one of the most amazing experiences for me because at that point I knew everyone via AOL Instant Messenger or that's what we were using. So to actually meet all of these people in person was great. And I ended up finishing second in that tournament. The next one was in 2017 in Vegas. I finished second in that tournament. And then I guess the next one was the next one was, I think it was 2018 in Vancouver. I didn't go to that because it was in Vancouver, which is pretty far from me.
Yeah.
And it was deep in October, which is a bad time of year just personally for work for me. So
and you're based in Jersey for people that are listening in.
Yeah. So I'm on the East Coast, New Jersey. So that was a tough one. So I didn't go to the third one in Vancouver. So in 2019, it was back in Toronto, which is a much easier trip for me in September. So I ended up coming in first. That was a great video because, well, for me, because it was a Game 7.
Yes.
And it went down to the wire.
Yes.
It's grueling against pretty much my number one opponent is Angry J93. He's I think the best NHL 94 player out there as far as consistency and dominance in leagues and live play. So that was my first King of 94 win. I had won some other live tournaments before that, but King 94 is the one that you kind of want.
Now you won that. You were playing as Quebec, and
in that Game 7, yes, it was. So I'll explain a little bit about the format. Mm-hmm. In the playoff or in that finals, it's a best of 7. Each game, the home team. No, I'm sorry. Which one was it? I think the away team picks the 2 teams to use, and then the home team picks which team they want to use, and then that's how you start. Which is a pretty neat format because you're going to pick 2 relatively equal teams, so you don't give your opponent a big advantage. And in that series, when you're playing a series against somebody, you can't pick any of the teams that were used before. So by the time we got to Game 7, it was Quebec, and I think Philly was the other team, I think.
Yes, it was.
And again, it's when you're in that live situation as a Game 7, it's very stressful because when the game goes wrong, you feel like you should have picked somebody else. And even though it's, there's you're playing against some of the best players out there. And when it goes right, you think, yeah, this team is great. So I think that one went down to it might have been overtime. Right? I think it was overtime. So it doesn't get any more exciting.
You had your boy Kovalenko. You had to win that one. It was it was in the cards for you to win that match.
I did, although I didn't. I think that I figured out that Kovalenko was really good for me after that. So it was pretty fortunate. And Quebec's tough, to be honest, because when you think of a lot of teams, there's usually the three forwards you will immediately draw your mind to when you start playing. But Quebec's interesting because you have Sundin Sakic, Valery Kamensky, who's got a pretty big shot, and you have Kovalenko, who's got a lot of defense. There's Mike Ricci, who's a little bit great accuracy. So you actually have
Nolan is there too. He's kind of
Nolan, exactly, and they're all viable options. And so in that way, I almost don't like Quebec because there's no you're going to second guess yourself if it's not going right. You're like, oh, I have all these bench players I should be putting in, and you don't know what the right combination is. Sometimes there's other teams like that too, like LA and Montreal, etc.
Is Hextall a good goalie to use? Because I mean, is he a heavy guy or no?
My personal opinion on goalies, it's Waugh and Belfour are 1A, 1B. Grant Fuhr in Buffalo is probably number 2, and I think everything else is the same. There's such a huge drop off to me. So to me, if you have Hextall and you name any other goalie, yeah, it gets pretty bad when you get really deep down into the Kelly Rudy, Fassé stuff. But yeah, to me, I would say they're just average. Unless you have one of those 3 that I mentioned, and in particular, those top 2 who I think are game changers. And I'll explain why. Why? Because you're looking at stats. I look at save percentage, and those 2 goalies in any regular ROM always have a high save percentage. They may give up a lot of goals against because you're not as good a player, but the save percentage, how many shots do they stop relative to how many shots are taken against them, consistently above. And I just think that makes a difference over the long haul.
Gotta pick your brain on something because I never figured out the answer to this. When you do a one-timer,
yeah,
doesn't matter if it's a forehand or a backhand, and can you aim?
In the Sega Genesis, I don't think you can aim. I think people have tried doing in an emulator. You could do a save state, so you could initiate a pass, do a one-timer, and then recall the save state back before you did the pass and just repeat that same thing and try. And I think the one-timer ends up going the same place every time on Sega. On Super Nintendo, you can't. So if you're playing the Super Nintendo version, you can actually aim the one-timer. And it's actually very important to do so. If it's when you're switching between the 2 consoles, if you're not used to aiming your one-timers, you're going to hit a lot of posts and miss, and you're just going to wonder what's going on, but you need to aim. So you can't aim that. The backhand forehand's interesting. I don't think it makes a difference. To me, the one-timers are so overpowered in NHL 94 because they absolutely fly off the player. Whether it's a forehand or a backhand, they just immediately just rip. The animation doesn't even make sense sometimes when you do it really close. I don't think there's a difference. It's a good question, though. I actually don't know if anyone's really tested that.
I guess we're gonna have to do this after the show. We'll do some deep analysis into that. But
I love it.
You're known for doing a lot of modification for ROMs. I'll give you some background here.
Mm-hmm.
The place I used to work at, and this was before the shutdown happened, the pandemic. I brought in a Raspberry Pi loaded up with a bunch of games and 4 joysticks. Now we used to play games like online games, arcade games like The Simpsons and stuff like that. But it didn't dawn on me, and I have 94. Why not play that? Started playing it. Everybody loved it. So we used to play the standard ROM, the 5 versus 5, the regular ROM that everybody plays with. But then I dug down into forums and I saw there was a 2v2 version, like just 2 players versus 2 players. You're the person responsible for that. I just want to thank you for that. And
I'll correct you. I'm not responsible for the initial 2v2 ROM was done before I entered the forums. There were people playing that. I modified it to the current version that I think everyone's using because there was a bug in the game in the original 2v2 when you edited the lines, the game would crash.
Yes.
And then one of the forum members, one of my Mount Rushmore of 94 people, Smazoma, he posted, here's how you fix the crash screen. So I just said, well, why don't I just do that for the 2v2 ROM because this is the greatest ROM ever. So yeah, I put that one out there, but I didn't create it originally. But I did fall in love with that. That is by far my most favorite ROM to play.
We had a ton of fun with all this playing, and some people were just kind of learning the game, but they picked it up quickly. As we mentioned earlier, it's a game that you could quickly pick up and play. And we had so much fun. And I'm not sure if this was an earlier ROM or not, but I think that it had the legends of each team. Like it was like Yager and Lemieux playing together. I know they played together, but those were the two players I remember, Fedorov and Yzerman. But it seemed like every team had different attributes. The players had different attributes. The ROM that I see now, the one that everybody plays, they have all the same stats, the same agility, the same speed. Am I wrong in thinking there was a version before that had individual stats?
Part of the appeal of the original 2v2 ROM was that all the players, albeit the names are there and different, and the teams are, the jerseys and the logos are all there. The actual attributes were standardized for every player. I think every attribute was a 4, and I think all the weights were 7. And the weights actually go from 0 to 14, I think. And so, because what you wanted to do is, you said, all right, we're going to take attributes out, and instead the game is all about you and your partner versus two others, and it's about the chemistry, it's about the gameplay, it's about how well you defend and how creative you can get on the offense. And it's one of those, it's very difficult to explain the appeal of 2v2 unless you play it. It's a different type of 94 game than you would ever be used to, but it's just magical when you have 4 people playing that one.
We did play, and there was one version too that even allowed the goalie to skate past the blue line, and we tried scoring with the goalies. We had so much fun with that.
That's great.
Is that your crowning achievement for ROM editing ROMs?
No. So I would say, like, again, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I'm not a programmer by nature or background, but because of my love of 94, but I do like puzzles, and the way I explain this is hacking a game, or at least looking at the code and just taking a little time to educate myself on what is 68K, which is the coding language the game's written in. There's so much information that's posted from people who've done all this great work. W Boy, his real name is Anton, who is the number one godfather of 94 hacking, and Rob Beck in 2000 before 2005 was doing all this great stuff. And Smazoma, who I mentioned, would post all this great material. And so I just took an interest in, and there was a great thread of how to actually do this, how to teach yourself how to do this. And so I just took it upon myself to learn, free time and trying this while you're not playing games, you could at least learn a bit. And I would say what my crowning achievement is, you're not going to like this, but as I took the NHL 95 game.
And I'm going to end this. Thank you very much for listening in. This is I'm kidding.
And I took the 95 game, which has the core of the game is 26 teams, which includes, back then in 1995. And I replicated all the great things that 94 was done, where I expanded the ROM to be able to handle 34 teams. I decompressed the graphics so you can now update the ROM to make it, change all the graphics very easily. And that I got really into. That's when I was like really just focused on modding that game. It was a passion project. It was fun, not because of 95. It was just in general. It's exciting if you could think about it. I think of it like puzzles. If you have ever done a serious puzzle and you're just, okay, I want to just, take my mind off of things for a bit, and you're looking for a single piece that's got to fit in this part that you're waiting for, and you're digging through all this random pieces, and you find that piece, and then when you put it in the puzzle and it sinks in and it fits, there's that little euphoria you would get. And when you're modifying or working on the ROM, I had the same feeling where, okay, I need to, what is the code that limits the teams to 26? And I need to find that, and there's ways to do it. And then when you change it, and then you say, I want it to have 34, and then you load the game up and it goes to 34, you just get so excited. And then the next step and the next step. But all of my knowledge was done with the help of the original 94 people, and I replicated a lot of that they did, and then learning a little bit from some external sites about assembly language, which is very helpful. You pick it up and you learn, and then I could say I could at least understand and learn it now. It takes me a lot longer than if you have a coding background, but I can be of use at least. So say if someone has a question, I understand a little bit about the mechanics of the game. Modifying a game, which mostly people think about graphics and stuff, or what it would entail to, for example, bring back fighting. I know the kind of level of effort it would take to do that. So, but I think of that as a reward that the community's given me, because it was fun, and it's not my core skill set, but it's something now that I enjoy doing.
It's time to start a GoFundMe so we could have fighting reintroduced back into the game of NHL 94 so we could pay people salary just to take away from their day job and actually do the right thing. And let's bring this back to the way it should be, to its original form. Now, in terms of ROMs,
if we hit the lottery, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're just going to pay some developers to be like, this is your job now. We want this.
So in terms of ROMs, what would, in your eyes, be the ultimate ROM that would be created?
If I can read, like, from just fixing everything.
Go ahead.
It's pretty much, it's really, it's hard to say. Like, NHL 94 is the way it is. I like the weight bug fix. So you just get rid of the CB check and I just like I think it was intended to have the players be the way they are. And a few of the, various minor bugs that are out there. But I don't really think there's much else to do. If I could, I would love to layer in season, like the features of 95. Create a player, trade a player, season mode, all of that in 94 would probably be the crown jewel of video games.
And you're a Genesis guy, from what I gather. Yeah. Do you prefer 5 versus 5, 2 versus 2? What's your jam?
Oh, I mean, if you told me that there was a great 5 versus 5 game or there's a 2v2 game, there's no doubt I'm running to that 2v2 game. I find that to just be just the most joy and fun to play. So, and I absolutely love 94 with 5-on-5, but the 2v2 is where I'll go every day.
So in the 2v2 ROMs, there's one setting in the main screen where you pick your team, auto goalie, and so forth. It says "Don't touch this," right? It's somewhere near the bottom. What is that?
Yeah, you'll notice that's actually in almost every modified modern ROM. There's this "Don't touch this." It's a legacy from when W. Boy, who was the first guy who essentially took the original 94 ROM, expanded it, and was able to say, okay, we have, instead of 26 teams, he made a 30-team ROM, which at the time in 2005 was enough to have all the new NHL teams, and it was amazing. What the do not touch was the what's that called? The user records. So when you load the original game, it'll say user records on and off. He just modified it to say do not touch, keep it off. All right, because at the time, I don't think he was sure that when you turn the user records on, that the RAM that's used for the user records may interfere with a lot of the hacking that he did. So he just said, don't touch it. And I think it just stayed that way. And people were, well, why can't it just says do not touch, and no one ever touched it. And basically when you're playing leagues and ROMs, you're not really thinking about user records. I mean, it was there, but it was sort of long forgotten. And I honestly think recently people just flipped it back. They're like, you can put the user records on. It's not, there's nothing happens. No one's noticed anything that happens when you turn it back on. But that's just something that no one touched for, I don't know, 10 years.
And I still don't touch it myself. I mean, not that I
don't touch
long,
it.
But I see it and I'm afraid to touch it. It's like my computer's going to fry or something. So I just leave it alone.
It's very intimidating. Do not touch.
It really is. All right, I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions here. I'm going to start shooting the puck at you. Let's see if you can stop them.
Let's go.
Most overrated team in the game?
Chicago.
I want to know why. And I want to do rapid fire. I'm curious your thoughts on this.
I say that because I think when someone has Chicago, they think there's like, all right, they are the best team in the game. So, but why are they overrated? Because Roenick is not necessarily unstoppable. And I think when you focus so much on Roenick and you don't have the skill sets to use all the other players, I'm personally comfortable playing against Chicago. So if you have Chicago, I'm like, I'm just going to destroy Jeremy Roenick, and you're going to struggle with Larmer and Goulet. You're not going to know what you're going to do on offense. They still have a formidable defense, but I don't think it's an automatic win. You take Chicago and game over. So that's why I say they're the most overrated, because they're the best team, but it's like, I think people overrate that in some way.
Most underrated team?
I'm cycling through the teams. That's a good one. I just won the recent Classic League with Montreal, and I was surprised because I never really liked them that much, and they're surprisingly good. But I think maybe St. Louis. I don't know.
Whoa. Bassett and Emerson, I'm guessing, on the wings.
It's Emerson and Bassin, and then I think Hull when you kind of. So here's where I'm coming up. We were talking before about how I'm a numbers guy and stats guy, so I love looking at data. And when we were doing a lot of the live tournaments with Halifax or Daryl was running them, we would talk. He would ask my input on a few things. And I think one of the things was when you're not aware of the teams, can we do a team ranking? So we put a lot of thought in that, partly numeric about, all right, what players just ratings will generate a good team, and then what are the actual results and how do teams match up? And again, spent a tremendous amount of time thinking about it, talking with other great players like Angry Jay and others on the forums, and getting input, and we came up with a pretty good ranking. And of that ranking, I think of all the teams, St. Louis seems to outperform where their ranking is. So that's kind of why I'm leaning towards St. Louis. They seem to be, wherever you bucket them in a tier, they kind of seem to play better than you would slot them in. So I would say they're kind of underrated.
What's the biggest upset you saw in tournament play?
Taking myself out of it, it's actually surprising because the people who have won, Angry Jay wins if it's not me, and there aren't really a lot of big upsets. It's just in the Sega Genesis, the top players usually, make it to the top 4, top 8, let's say, and there's never really a big surprise. I've lost some games, of series which would be considered big upsets, but that happens. You lose. I honestly don't think of one. I can't think of one that sticks out when you say the question. I don't think of anything that's like, wow, it was a big upset.
So I guess there's no big letdowns that you saw in tournament play as well. Then I guess the same thing applies. That just
no. Now, again, outside of myself, if I don't make it to the end, I feel like, all right, I could have done better. But it's the top guys. Again, you could group them in, but you'll never see a no-name person just pop in and all of a sudden they're in the top 8. That just hasn't happened.
What's the cheapest? Oh, sorry.
On the Sega side. On the Super Nintendo side, there's the biggest upset I will say is that King of 94 won. We had a pretty established online community of players. Mm-hmm. And everyone thought the online community was the best. The person who won, King of 94 won, was a total unknown player. His name was Mikhail. He showed up and won the Super Nintendo tournament. And I didn't really know a lot about the Super Nintendo, but I thought, man, and Sega was, it was chalk. We all knew who the top players were, and they all went to the final. So Super Nintendo something was going on. This guy, how is it possible? Turns out many years later, that guy is just ridiculously good. He is like the best Super Nintendo player ever. He's entered like 3 tournaments. He's won all 3. He's undefeated. And when I watch him play, he does things no one else does. So on the Super Nintendo side, I would say that's a little bit more surprising, or there's more variance in who can make it. But on Sega, there hasn't been that sneaky player yet, and in a live setting who can just show up and I'm the best, and I'll show up and show all these guys how it's done. It's too big of a learning curve, in my opinion.
What's the cheapest move that you think is in NHL 94?
The 5-hole pass shot from center ice. Brutal.
That's a game killer, isn't it? It just deflates the
happens so quick. It's hard to stop, and if it just zings through the goalie's legs, it's brutal. That's my least favorite.
What's your dream team in NHL 94 for 2v2 players? So pick 4 players that you'd like to have a dream matchup in 2v2.
Like other human opponents, you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Human, and you can include yourself if you want. It's your choice.
Oh yeah, I would love to. There's a guy named Friday, his online name. He was, I think, the best 2v2 player I've ever played against. So he would be one. there's another guy named Habs, for the Canadians. He was also awesome. I think that would be my dream team. Those two guys and me, and it'd be tough to think of who's the top guy there. They're both Canadian, so I'll get a USA player. I'll take this guy named Ice Storm as the USA versus Canada.
There you go. We should organize this if we can.
Oh, well, you say that. There was a great tournament called the Summit Series. Mazoma and Halifax ran it. It was USA Canada, best to 100, and they of course modified a ROM. So anyone who signed up, your name was in the ROM. So you'd be like, oh, I'm using Len and I'm using Raph, and so cool. So Len and Raph are playing. So you're Canadian, right? So we wouldn't be playing together, but you would be against each other, which was really a lot of fun. And then you would just post the scores, and then I think it was just all for fun, USA versus Canada. But adding that little element of USA Canada, it just made it so much more competitive and fun.
Who won that?
I think Canada won the 2 seasons of. I think the first one was like 51-4. It went down to like the very end. But Canada had the better 2v2 players.
If you had to play a game for the rest of your life, and it's going to be NHL, the first 92, or NHL 95, which game would it be?
If I had to play it for the rest of my life, 92 or 95. Oh man, I'm going to go with 92. That game is awesome.
It is fun.
Yeah, I love so much about it, and there are certain sounds in that game, like when you hit the post.
Yes,
that it just gives me a huge nostalgia shot. I remember just that feeling when I first played that game. So that can never be beat.
If you shoot it into an open net after the whistle's blown, every time you do that in 92, it hits the net. Sorry, hits the post.
That loud post.
Yeah, always does that. In 95, 94 doesn't do that. Sometimes it gets into the net, but for whatever reason, it always hits the post in 92.
In the post in 94 is that like high pitched, ding sound, but that 92 just sounds like just a bar that just shakes the whole screen.
I love that.
I love that too.
Is there a difference between home and away in 2v2?
Technically, no. Even in the regular game, what we can definitively say, the stats show there's a higher win percentage at home overall than away. So there is a home ice advantage. There is. What that is still a little bit like we know that you get a little bit of a player boost and stuff like that. So your attributes are accelerated for some teams at home versus others. So in general, it's small, but there is a little bit of an advantage. In 2v2, we tried to make all the advantages the same, etc. So I don't know if there is home or away, but if there is, I don't think it's as impactful as just the randomness that comes up in any given game.
Thoughts on NHL Rewind? This is the game that's available on Xbox.
I was super excited, of course, as the dream is to have a stable sort of worldwide platform that you can use NHL 94 on. So when the rumors of 90 Rewind were coming out, I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be amazing. Like the actual core game on Xbox and PlayStation would be amazing. So I was very intrigued, but then very disappointed when I found out that online play was not part of the features. I actually reached out to the development team. Oh man, it'll come to me what their name is. But it's a small team, small shop that did it, and kind of was asking, hey, we're super fans and we just love the product that you made. There's nuances to the Rewind that are different. So of course, all of the fanatics of the 94 community were like picking apart, the game and what are the nuances. They had skin tone differences for certain players, which is, fascinating. And you're like, how can you do that? Me knowing a little bit about ROM hacking, I'm like, you can't do that in the game. It's impossible. So I found that there's ways you can do it when using the tools that they have, which is like an engine that runs on top of the game to do these other things and modify some of the code. So it was super exciting, but in a sense short-lived because I can just play the game at home on Xbox, but that's not as exciting because, at our age, all your friends and most everyone I know is dispersed around the United States or wherever, and so it's not as easy to have people come over and play on the couch next to you as you did when you were a kid. You know, we all have different lives now, so it's a little bit disappointing. I still love that it was out there and it created a bit of a buzz, and the graphic updates and all these cool things were there, but it sort of faded away because of that lack of online play.
I couldn't get used to the joystick. I have the Xbox.
Well, playing on an Xbox?
Yeah, I could not get used to. I'm always hitting that top button. I don't know what button number or what letter it is, but that's the one that pauses the game. And when doing one timers, for whatever reason, I prefer the Genesis, old style Genesis, or even the Super Nintendo joystick. I prefer that.
Yeah.
And another thing that I noticed with that is I don't watch hockey these days. I used to be a huge hockey fan right up until I guess 2008, and I pretty much stopped watching the game. But now when I played, so we're in the same boat. But everybody's wearing numbers that are like over 50. It's like, what happened? Did they retire all numbers below 50? And like, it just seemed odd that all these random numbers. Before it was just, you see 99, 66, 77, 88, stuff like that. But
rare, yeah.
Yeah. But anyways,
that's pretty funny. Yeah. Who was your favorite hockey team?
The Leafs. I used to love watching them back in the days. And I'm still bitter what happened in 1993 when Kerry Fraser didn't call the high stick against Gilmore for Gretzky. He clipped Gretzky. He clipped Gilmore. Gilmore was cut. None of those. Neither the two linesmen nor the ref, Kerry Fraser, screw you, saw it. Then a few minutes later, Gretzky scores the goal in overtime to bring the game to Game 7, and that's the end of it. Like, I don't know. I'm still bitter about that. That would have been a phenomenal final because it would have been the Habs against the Leafs, and that's a rivalry, at least at that time, which was a bitter rivalry. I don't know how.
I learned there's a lot of Leafs fans in the '94 community, so I've come to appreciate the historical pain and suffering that they've endured, and I didn't really fully appreciate before.
I don't know what it's like now, but I'm sure they're carrying on the torch these days. Now, we've been at this for almost an hour. I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to bring up or any topic that you just want to cover that we haven't yet, because, I'll leave the floor over to you. And man, just whatever you want to talk about, go right ahead. If not, we can just wrap things up because I'm very thankful for you to come on.
No, and I'm thankful for you. You came on and you said, I'm going to do a podcast on '94, and I was like, okay, this will be interesting. And then you're actually doing it, and it's fantastic. And you're now engaged in the community and learning about it. And to me, you are one of it gets me excited when I see new people, who clearly know '94 and played it, and they kind of join the community, but then add to it and then are excited about it or talking about it. So just thank you for doing what you're doing, and we'll encourage you to keep it up and stick around and ask questions and learn and definitely start playing online. It's one of the things that I've for years I've always wanted, right? I mean, it's a hobby, and there's only so much time in the day to dedicate to just this side hobby. And everything that everyone does is of their own free time, and there's some amazing amount of work and time that people have put into the game and talking about it and modifying it, and it's wonderful. And I've always just wanted more people to find it, join it. It can look intimidating, but really once you're there and you're set up, you can relive and find that joy. So if anyone's listening or watching, and just check out NHL94.com. Most of the chatter these days is on Discord, which I know is intimidating, because if you've never done that, you're like, I don't need a new app and all that. But at least you can look at the forums. You can look at NHL94online.com, which will show you one of the things that I loved: leagues, standings, player stats, playoffs, histories, different types of leagues. You can, if you just like that, and you can see what people are doing, the current leagues that are on. It's just fun. And there's a lot of people who actually stream live games now, playoff games, and it's it's also fun when you have people commentating and talking about the game. And I just think it adds so much more fun to the whole community. So yeah, check all of that out. It's just a great thing. It's very non-confrontational or I don't even know what the word is, but it's just.
You haven't played me yet.
Yeah, you're just gonna have a good time. Right.
I'll butt heads with anybody. No, I'm kidding. I just have a good time.
It's all fun, right? It's not a place you're gonna look for to get more stressed. It's a place to take your mind off the real world, be a kid again, and just enjoy some, just playing video games, fun video games.
Yeah, bang on. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time to come on this podcast, and we may have to do this again in the very near future, especially as we get closer, even past the King of 94 tournament. Maybe I'll see you there if you show up, but we'll see what happens. But yeah,
I'll be there.
awesome. And so for everybody listening and watching, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, keep your stick on the ice and your controller plugged in.